we don't need an ideal, do we, as a being such as Jesus or Buddha? Yeah, as you say, it could be just a question.
Yes, an ideal is something that we choose, and when you look at some of the self-help programs that have come out over the last 50 or more years, they've all been utilizing this principle. So a chosen ideal doesn't have to be necessarily quote-unquote spiritual. It could be somebody trying to be successful in their life, and the principle has always been to be clear about what it is you're after, and then pour your energy into it and act on that. I think that's the message of the recently very popular The Secret, for example. It's really not such a secret. It's just that people need to be reminded every now and then that this is the dynamic that's operating within all of us. So it can be applied in many avenues of life. When it's applied to the spiritual avenue, that ideal is chosen. It is personal. And, a person's chosen ideal can be their child, can be their wife, can be the community they live in. And an interesting thing about this is that wherever we start with our chosen ideal, even if it's just to find out, is there something more than this? One's personal ideal, assuming they are practicing, will evolve.
Yes.
So a personal ideal will evolve from maybe something very simple to something that could encompass the whole world.
Can
Gandhi's a good example of that.
Can our ideal limit us?
I think if it's imposed from outside, definitely yes. And this is the caution that everyone should have about accepting an ideal that is given to us by someone else. We go to our church and they say, well, you must worship this, and you must worship it in this way.
Yes, and this is the only way.
That may be fine for people who are just sort of getting into their spirituality. But as people go along, everybody's evolution kind of has its own beat and its own rhythm. And the further along people get in their spiritual development, the more individual their chosen ideal may become. And ironically, in the end, everybody's chosen ideal becomes universal.
Yeah.
Somebody once said that it's good to be born in the church, but it's not so good to die in one. So
yes, I see what you're saying.
I think that captures the idea of how an ideal can be limiting if it's imposed on you.
I think AA for alcoholics has been a good catalyst for that, and a good ideal for certain people, where they've started there and then it's progressed towards a God or a higher power, and then moved on to meditation and other teachings.
Oh yes, that's a beautiful example of a Bhakti path, because here you take the worst possible situation in life and you turn it around into a highly devotional and nourishing path that can lead all the way out to enlightenment. I'm highly supportive of 12-step path, especially for people who come into the spiritual path. And many do come to AYP who may have a drug problem or some other kind of addiction.
Yes.
And there have been some remarkable stories of people taking up meditation and overcoming addictions. However, in some cases, it's just too much. There's just too much baggage there, and it's too deep. And so I'm not reluctant at all to recommend that people go and do 12 steps. And if they are inclined to be meditating at the same time while they're doing that, that's fine. But it's an excellent resource, and it is Bhakti-based, as you say.
Yes, absolutely. Would you say that our Ishta changes throughout our life? It develops and grows with us?
Well, I think it can if we're proactive with our practices and on our spiritual path. I think that's obviously what it's all about. So yes, we we develop our initial desire, we find our chosen ideal, we flow toward that, we engage in practices, and we grow. And then as we grow, our ideal is going to evolve along with the purification and opening that's occurring in our nervous system. Definitely, yes. But getting back to the business of a limiting ideal, if we're just sort of standing pat on an ideal as our position or the team that we're on or whatever, which is often, unfortunately, the case with sectarian beliefs, then that ideal, there could be very strong resistance to that ideal changing at all. For example, somebody who starts in Christianity may end up, in another religion or in no religion at all, and obviously that's not going to be acceptable within a sectarian environment. So,
yes.
So as long as a person can overcome sectarian pressures and is engaged in spiritual practices, definitely the ideal is going to expand. It's, in the book, there's kind of a little sequence laid out where the ideal begins as just something very simple, like a question, who am I, or something like that. And then it can evolve to what's actually happening in our body. There can be energy, there can be stillness going on in the body coming up, and practices are, more practices are being added on, and then that's all expanding. There's some rise of ecstasy. All of these things can be vehicles for expanding our chosen ideal. And it can be within the original ideal expanding, or it can take us to other structures or icons. And eventually we go beyond the icons to the unity of life. And so the evolution eventually becomes, our ideal becomes oneness. Yes, definitely evolves.
Tell us about the systematic transformation of emotion, and tell us what that is.
Well, having a scientific background myself, I kind of look at it as a pretty scientific thing, and by that I mean there's cause and there's effect.
Yes.
And if you can achieve the same effect every time you apply the same cause, that's something that's verifiable.
Yes.
And the transformation of emotion, it really has two basic sides to it. We can take our positive emotions and direct them toward our chosen ideal. For example, let's suppose we go up to the beach and see a beautiful sunrise, and we're just inspired and we're filled with the glory of that. And then we can develop a habit to say, this is the divine expressing in the world. Now I'm going to take that and go and meditate and expand that more within myself as silence. So transforming positive emotions is pretty obvious and pretty easy. Then there's the transformation of negative emotions. For example, we're stuck in a traffic jam, and we're going to be late for a meeting, and we're tempted to lean on our horn and be angry. Well, we can take that anger and say, direct it at our chosen ideal. God, I'm so angry, not because I'm in this traffic jam, but because I'm not more enlightened. And I'm going to take this energy and I'm going to go sit on my meditation seat. That's a bit of a simplification, but you get the idea. And the funny thing about that is, it seems rather simplistic, but when you take those kinds of transformations in thinking, things actually happen, because Bhakti is a powerful force. And even before you get to the meditation seat, say you're in the traffic jam and you're angry and you're stuck, and so you decide you're just going to pull off the highway and meditate in a restaurant or whatever. You go in the restaurant and you meet someone who changes your life in a positive way. Now, was that an accident? Was that coincidence?